Hello travelers, Boardman21 here, and now we're going to discuss the second skill of 5 that have been revealed today for the Falconer, and this time we're going to go over the Explosive Trap, which I'm going to say is probably the most hyped skill that I look forward to in 1.0. It just has a lot of interesting nodes in it. So let's go ahead and discuss those nodes, and then at the end of this video will be gameplay showing a lot of different specs of that tree. So let's start off with what is Explosive Trap. It throws a trap that explodes when triggered, dealing throwing fire damage. Traps take 0.4 seconds to arm and explode when enemies walk over them or after 30 seconds. You can have a maximum of 6 active traps at a time, and it scales with dexterity as well as throwing and fire. Added damage applies at 300% effectiveness to the explosion. And by arming, or when triggered, trigger is when an enemy obviously probably walks over it. Alright, let's go ahead and dive into the right side first. We have Minefield. You can now have more active explosion traps at once, so you have a 6 base. This adds 4 more, so you can now have up to 10 traps. We have Trap Sprinkler. Whenever an explosive trap detonates, it has a chance to drop a fresh explosive trap at its location as long as there is an enemy within 6 meters. And that's a 30% chance for drop. That's pretty cool. So basically, if you throw one, there's a 30% chance that it's going to replace it with another one as long as there is an enemy close by. We have Automated Bombardment. Explosive Trap has an additional chance to drop a fresh explosive trap via the Trap Sprinkler node, but Explosive Trap costs more mana. And with that 70% plus this 30%, there's a 100% chance that you're basically getting 2 traps for 1 every time that you throw it, as long as there are enemies nearby. And this does increase the mana cost. Explosive traps dropped by the Trap Sprinkler node are now instead flung at a nearby enemy within 12 meters rather than just being dropped. Explosive traps dropped by the Trap Sprinkler node can now drop explosive traps when there's an enemy within 12 meters, even if there is not an enemy within 6 meters. So it extends that range and it throws the trap that would have just dropped on the ground. So that's pretty cool. And then we have Instrument of the Alchemist. When an explosive trap drops a trap by the Trap Sprinkler node, it also flings an acid flask for you towards the target location. This consumes mana equal to a portion of acid flask mana cost. So you get exploding flasks flying, you get secondary traps flying. That's actually some pretty cool synergies. And then over here we have Siege Engineering. Whenever an explosive trap detonates, it now has a chance to create a ballista for you. And this consumes mana equal to a portion of ballistas, and it's only 50% of the original cost. So every trap you have going off has a 20% chance to summon a ballista. So it looks like you could just go around throwing traps and having ballistas automatically be procced for you at half their normal mana cost. That's pretty huge. Over here we got Clustered Explosives. You now throw additional explosive traps per use, but explosive traps cost more. And it looks like you can throw 3 traps instead of 1. That's pretty cool. Up here, No Man's Land. When you directly throw explosive trap, you now throw traps up to your maximum number of traps in a wide area around the target location. Explosive traps deals more damage per maximum traps, but it now has a cooldown and cost per maximum trap as well. So you can have up to 10 traps, so you'd be throwing 10 traps at once. Damage per max trap is plus 4%, so you get 40% more damage. The mana cost, wow, would be 120% increase, and you'd have a 12-second cooldown. The cooldown's not that bad, but that's a huge mana cost. With some cooldown recovery, maybe it would be worth it, but I feel like with how fast you can get attack speed in this game, you'd probably just want to throw 3 at a time versus throwing 10 at a time. And then over here, Blast Rain. You now shoot arrows attached with explosive traps up into the air that then drop down around the target location. Explosive Trap now scales with your bow damage instead of throwing damage, and your bow attack speed instead of throwing attack speed. And then of course it requires a bow. That's pretty cool. So you can now rain down the traps from above. Impact Trigger. Explosive traps now instantly detonate when the arrows hit the ground via the Blast Rain node, ignoring arming time. So they no longer have to arm. They literally explode the moment they hit the ground. That's pretty cool. That's going to turn into a really cool bow build that you have there. That would be pretty awesome, that the moment they come down they explode. As long as it's around enemies, you could have it throwing secondary traps and acid flask. That seems like a lot of explosions, so that could be a lot of fun. We have Jolker's Blueprint. Explosive traps cost less mana, and it has increased throwing attack speed. And of course that probably switches to bow attack speed up there, but a lot of mana efficiency. Subtle Sabotage has more reduced mana costs. This does reduce the damage and area of it though. Down here we have Sky Signal. Whenever one of your explosive traps detonate, your Falcon deals more damage for a short duration. The Falcon damage buff of 15% every time that a trap goes off, and it can stack unlimitedly. That sounds like you're going to get a lot of Falcon damage out of that. And Free Lofting Bird, whenever one of your explosive traps detonate, your Falcon skills recover a portion of the remaining cooldown. So you can get the cooldown of the skills like Aerial Assault, Falcon Strikes, or Falcon Knives, as well as Dive Bomb. Sounds like you can get their cooldown down a lot. That's pretty cool. Smoke Traps. Explosive trap hits have a chance to grant you a stack of Dust Shroud. Ooh, if you want to get yourself some extra defense with those Dust Shrouds, which give you Glancing Blow and Dodge rating. We have Umbral Saboteur. Explosive trap deals additional throwing damage per stack of Dust Shroud on you. Ooh, that's a really good synergy there. More defense and more offense. The Gadgeteer. Explosive traps deal more damage if the arming time is not ignored, but it takes longer for it to arm before it can detonate. Damage after full arming time, 50% more damage. Arming time goes up from 0.3 with an additional 0.6, so almost 1 second for it to actually get armed though, for 50% more damage. We have Prepared Demolition. Explosive traps deal more damage in a larger area for each second it has existed before detonating up to a maximum. 60% more damage per second, 60% more area per second for a maximum of 3 seconds. But that's still pretty big. I mean, you're talking about up to 180% increased damage in area. That's pretty insane if you can time it right. Tinker's Design. The trigger area is larger, detonation area is also larger. Basically what this means is enemies can be a little bit farther away from the trap before it explodes, and then the explosion itself will be even larger. That's pretty cool. We have Adapted Fuse. Particularly fast enemies with a movement speed above 6 meters per second trigger explosive traps instantly, even if they haven't armed. Additional explosive traps hits deal more damage. That's pretty cool. Another 15% more damage there. Down here we have Cold Snap Mines. Explosive traps base fire damage is converted to cold. Consequently, this damage scales with increases to cold damage, but not increases to fire damage. Fire resist shred from all sources is changed to cold resist shred, and obviously it swaps tags, so you can turn it into cold. Flash Frozen. Explosive traps hits have a chance to chill enemies on hit now, and it has a flat +3 freeze rate per point of int. That's actually pretty crazy. That's a lot of just base freeze that you can get there. And then 1 point in freezing trap. When you directly throw explosive trap, its hits always freeze enemies, but it now has a cooldown. It has a 15-second cooldown. The remaining cooldown is recovered on an actual freeze that you do of 10%. So depending on how many enemies you freeze with a hit, this is probably really good for huge groups of mobs, but that's a long cooldown that you'd have to wait if not. We have Trappus. When directly using explosive trap, an unconverted explosive trap and a trap corresponding to each conversion node you have taken are thrown at the same time. Traps thrown this way are thrown in a small area. Additional explosive traps deals less damage in a smaller area. Ooh. I don't know if I would want to throw multiple types out, especially for less area and less damage, but hey, it's in there for a reason. Maybe something good will come out of that one. We have Ash Compartment. Explosive traps deal more damage and hits have fire shred. Pretty nice. Whenever you hit an enemy with any melee attack, you attach an explosive trap to that enemy. Ooh, this reminds me a lot of like melee skills on the Mage that apply spark charges on hit, so that's pretty cool. This effect has a 1.5 second cooldown, and attached traps explode after 1 second, ignoring arming time, or when the enemy is attached to it dies. Enemies cannot have more than 1 trap attached. Okay, very limited. That's kind of rough. And then Aspect of the Rabbit. Attached traps deal more damage. If the enemy that the explosive trap is attached to hits you, it now attaches to you instead, but will still only damage enemies. It's kind of an interesting way to play it. However, it's only a little bit more damage. Additionally, when it explodes, the trap deals 30% more damage for each time it has been passed. Kind of interesting, though. Then we have Arrow Traps. When an explosive trap detonates, all other explosive traps now also detonate in quick succession and fire detonating arrows at the original target's location. This consumes mana equal to detonating arrows mana cost, also using its tree, which is really cool. That's a good way to get some extra procs in there. A little cast on crit, if you will. Blasting Device. Detonating arrows fired this way deal additional bow damage per 3 decks. You can get a ton of flat damage for detonating arrows as well. That's pretty crazy. We have static mines, explosive traps, base fire damage is now converted to lightning. Okay, so you can play it as fire, you can play it as cold, and you can play it as lightning. So all the elemental types, that's pretty cool. And lightning bomb, explosive trap hits have a chance to shock enemies and inflict them with spark charge. You can actually have spark charge on hits. I like how this one is not limited. There is no cap, there is no cooldown on that, so every trap can actually do a spark charge. So there seems like there's some really good int and lightning ways to play this, so that's pretty sick. Overall, being able to play all the different elements, being able to turn it into a bow attack, a throwing attack, play it with melee to have it proc things, like having that and the chance to summon acid flash, ballistas to buff your falcon. This thing has a little bit of everything in it, so overall, really like this skill. It has a really good layout. But I'm going to go ahead and leave you guys with gameplay of several different ways it's spec'd in the tree for the rest of this video, and as always, stay safe and have a good one.